When I thought I finally caught my dream by the tail, everything fell apart. This is my story of how I climbed back up from rock bottom. I thought owning a house would fix everything. I spent 5 years living in the spare room at my parents' place, getting up before sunrise, driving the same 15 minutes to the factory, eating the same cold sandwiches on my lunch break, coming home tired but thinking, one day it'll be worth it. I wasn't dreaming of anything fancy. I didn't want a mansion. I just wanted a small place with a cracked driveway and enough grass for a busted grill. I saved every damn penny, skipped vacations, skipped new clothes, skipped dinners out with friends until they stopped inviting me. I stacked dollar bills in an old shoebox under my bed, counting down until I could finally hand a bank a chunk of money and say, "Here, see, I earned this." When I got the keys to my house, I didn't cry. I just sat on the floor of the empty living room with the lights off and listened to my own breathing echo off the walls. 6 months. I lived there 6 months. Painted the kitchen myself. Installed a used washer and dryer that rattled like hell but still worked. Had my parents over for dinner once, cheap spaghetti and store-brand wine. They smiled like they were proud, but I could tell they were worried. They knew how thin my margins were. I knew too. I just didn't let myself think about it. Then the letter came. Restructuring. Automation. Entire department gone. I didn't even get a handshake. Just a severance check that barely covered the mortgage for 2 months. I tried to find work fast. Anything. But the factories around here were all cutting back, not hiring. Construction gigs dried up for winter. Uber driving barely scratched the gas costs. I picked up odd jobs, fixing fences, patching drywall, but nothing steady. Every month the numbers slipped lower. Every month I told myself it was temporary. I took a loan to cover the gap. Then another. And another. It's funny how fast a dream turns into a trap. 1 missed payment. Then 2. Then a letter pinned to my door. I remember staring at it, barefoot, coffee cooling in my hand, thinking, it wasn't supposed to go like this. I was supposed to be safe now. I was supposed to have made it. Instead, I packed up what little furniture I had and moved back into my parents' spare room. 31 years old. No job. No house. No plan. Just a duffel bag, 2 maxed-out credit cards, and a mountain of silence I didn't know how to climb out of. The first few weeks back home were the worst. Not because my parents weren't good to me, they were. Quiet. Careful. Like I was made of glass and might shatter if they breathed too loud. No, it was me. It was waking up in that small bed again, the posters I hung up at 16 still curling off the walls, and feeling like the world had spun backwards without asking me. It was hearing my dad clear his throat in the hallway when the mail came, wondering if it was another collections notice. It was seeing my mom leave little pamphlets around the house, things about managing debt and coping with loss, like I wouldn't notice them tucked under the remote. I tried. God, I tried. Sent out resumes. Applied for every warehouse, delivery, call center job I could find. Some places didn't even bother to say no. They just didn't say anything at all. I picked up more Uber shifts. Ran errands for a few people through those gig apps. Hauled trash for a neighbor who tipped me a sandwich instead of cash. Every night I came home with aching knees and just enough money to make a dent in the interest but never the principal. It's like trying to shovel water out of a sinking boat with your bare hands. One night, my mom sat me down. Just me and her at the kitchen table, the smell of burnt coffee in the air. She said there was a meeting at the community center. For people who've been knocked around a little, she said. It might help, she said. I wanted to tell her I wasn't some broken dog. I wanted to tell her no amount of group hugs would pay my debts. But instead, I just nodded. Because fighting costs energy I didn't have anymore. That Wednesday I went. Sat in a folding chair in a room that smelled like floor cleaner and desperation. Listened to people talk about losing jobs, marriages, houses. About how they felt small. Invisible. Useless. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel crazy. I started going every week. Not because I thought it would fix me. But because it was the only place where I didn't have to pretend I was fine. After the meetings, I started a little ritual. Nothing big. Just coffee. There was a small shop down the block from the center. Always smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon. The lights were warm. The chairs wobbly. It felt safe. I'd order a coffee, sit by the window, and just breathe. No laptop. No resumes. No banking apps. Just me and a paper cup and the knowledge that for one small hour, nobody needed anything from me. That's where I first saw her. Claire. Behind the counter, pulling shots and wiping tables and laughing at the old men who tried to flirt with her. I didn't think anything of it at first. Just a barista, just another face in the static. But it's funny how a routine can crack open something you thought was buried. And it's even funnier how fast a simple hello can start feeling like a lifeline. It stayed simple for a long time. I'd order coffee, she'd smile, ask if I wanted the usual, and that was it. No long conversations, no awkward pauses. Just small, steady moments that stitched themselves into my week without me noticing. I didn't expect it to change. Wasn't looking for it. Then one night I was driving Uber again. Third shift that week. Bone tired, radio low, trying not to think about how the gas gauge was almost on empty and I still had 2 more payments due this month. I pulled up to a coffee shop, not hers, just another place downtown, and the pickup name said Claire. I didn't think much of it. Claire's a common enough name. But when the door opened, it was her. Same ponytail. Same faded black hoodie with the fraying sleeves. She slid into the back seat, looked up, and blinked. "Mark," she said. I laughed before I could stop myself. Small world. She smiled, a little embarrassed. "Late shift," she said. "Borrowed a car last week. Guess it finally gave up." I pulled into traffic, trying not to make it weird. Asked where she was headed. Asked how work was. She talked about it like it was just something she did, not something she loved. Said she was taking night classes at the community college. Business admin trying to get a foot in somewhere, anywhere. I told her a little about me, about the house, about the jobs. Not everything. Just enough. She didn't flinch. Didn't say sorry like most people do when they hear you've been kicked around. She just listened. Like it wasn't a failure to be struggling. Like it was just a thing that happens sometimes. I dropped her off and she leaned in through the window before leaving. "Next coffee's on me," she said. And smiled. The next morning, she meant it. When I walked in, she had a cup already waiting. "No charge," she said. "You're kind of a regular now." That was the start of it. Not a big thing. No fireworks. Just more conversations. More laughs. More quiet moments where it didn't feel like I was carrying the whole world on my back. Some days after meetings, she'd sit with me for a few minutes when the shop was slow. Sometimes she'd tell me about a class she hated. Sometimes I'd tell her about the worst Uber passenger of the night. It wasn't about fixing anything. It wasn't even about hope, not really. It was just someone seeing you. Really seeing you. Without pity. Without agenda. And after the year I'd had, that was more valuable than any paycheck. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't some big moment where everything clicked into place and all my problems disappeared. Life doesn't work like that. Bills still came. Debt collectors still left voicemails. My truck still coughed every time I tried to start it on cold mornings. But somehow it all felt a little less heavy. Maybe it was the meetings. Maybe it was the coffee. Maybe it was Claire, laughing at some stupid story I told about a guy who tipped me with a bag of potato chips and half a smile. Maybe it was just time. I picked up a few steadier gigs. Drywall patches. Gutter repairs. Odd jobs that didn't pay much, but kept me moving. I stopped thinking about getting back to where I was. Stopped measuring everything against the house I lost. Started measuring it by smaller things. A full tank of gas. A warm dinner. A night without panic. Claire and I kept talking. Kept sitting together after her shifts. Some days she was exhausted and just leaned her head against the table while I sipped my coffee. Some days we talked about stupid dreams, like opening a food truck that sold nothing but grilled cheese sandwiches. And one night, without making a big deal of it, she slipped her number across the table and said, "You don't have to be alone in this, you know." I didn't call right away. I was scared. Not of her. Of hope. Of wanting something again after losing so much. But eventually, I did. And she answered. And somehow, it wasn't scary after that. It wasn't magic. It wasn't fixing everything. It was just good. Real. Human. A few months later, I moved into a small apartment. Nothing fancy. Peeling paint, creaky floors, a heater that rattled like it was haunted. But it was mine. Paid for with my own work, my own calloused hands. I stood in the middle of that tiny living room the first night, looking around at the crooked blinds and second-hand couch, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Pride. Not the loud kind you post about. The quiet kind you carry in your chest like a steady heartbeat. Claire came by with a pizza and a bottle of cheap wine. We sat on the floor, eating straight from the box, laughing about how bad the faucet leaked. It wasn't the dream house. It wasn't the life I thought I was building. But it was something better. It was real. Built slow. Built honest. Built the hard way. And this time, it wasn't going to fall just because the world decided to shake. When the lawyer called me, I didn't expect much. Maybe a dusty toolbox. Maybe Grandpa's old watch he never took off, even when he was working under cars. Instead, he slid a single house key across the desk. "It's yours," he said, almost apologetic. I drove out right after work. 20 minutes from the city, tucked at the edge of an old neighborhood where the streets had no sidewalks and half the houses looked like they were holding their breath. Grandpa's place was at the end of a short cul-de-sac, hidden behind a fence that leaned like it had given up. The house wasn't falling down, not yet. But it was close. Sagging porch. Flaked paint like sunburned skin. Gutters hanging loose like broken ribs. I sat there in my beat-up truck for a while, staring at it. Should have felt disappointed. Should have thought about the money it would take to fix it up. Instead, I felt something different. Pride, maybe. Or stubbornness. Grandpa had built this place. Piece by piece after the war. Not pretty, but solid. And now it was mine. I fished the key out of my pocket and pushed open the front door. The smell hit first: dust, old wood, the faint metallic scent of time. The carpet was matted and stained. The walls yellowed from decades of cigarette smoke. The kitchen cabinets hung crooked like drunk soldiers. It was a mess. But it was my mess. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my parents. Not the few friends I still grabbed beers with. I didn't want advice. I didn't want pity. I wanted a chance to see if I could do it. If I could bring it back to life. I started slow. Weekends, evenings after my warehouse shifts. Pulled up carpet with my bare hands. Scrubbed walls until my knuckles bled. Watched hours of YouTube just to figure out how to fix a leaking pipe without flooding the place. Every dollar I didn't need to survive went into that house. Every spare minute too. It wasn't pretty work. Some nights I sat on the front steps, arms dead from hammering, thinking I was an idiot. But then I'd look up and see the porch lights I installed, still burning against the dark, and think, maybe not. Maybe this was how you built a life. Not all at once. But one ugly, stubborn, hopeful piece at a time. After a year, the house still looked rough from the street. But inside, it was mine. My fingerprints on every doorknob. My sweat in every nail. It felt like I'd finally built something nobody could take away from me. I didn't know yet how wrong I was. The first real trouble showed up on a Sunday afternoon. I was pulling down some old drywall in the laundry room, figured I'd patch it up, maybe throw a coat of paint on it, make it look halfway decent. But when I tore off the last sheet, I saw it. Cracks running through the foundation like veins. Not little ones either. Big, deep ones. The kind that don't fix themselves with a bucket of spackle and a prayer. I just stood there for a minute, drywall dust clinging to my shirt, heart sinking somewhere into my boots. I called a contractor the next morning. He came by, took one look, and shook his head like he was looking at a wounded animal that wasn't gonna make it. "You're lucky the house hasn't shifted yet," he said. "But it will. Sooner rather than later." I asked him how bad. He named a number. Over 20 grand. $20,000 I didn't have. 20,000 reasons to walk away. I could have given up right there. Sold the house for scrap, maybe salvaged a few bucks, called it a loss. But standing in that half-gutted laundry room, I couldn't do it. I thought about Grandpa building this place. About every hour I'd spent sanding floors and rewiring outlets. About how this was supposed to be my start. My real start. So I did the stupid thing. The desperate thing. I walked into a bank 2 days later and signed papers with my hand shaking so bad I almost dropped the pen. Took out a loan big enough to choke on. They sent a crew. Jacked up the house. Poured new supports. Fixed the cracks. Reinforced the whole foundation. When they finished, the place didn't look different from the outside. But inside, I knew it, this house wasn't going anywhere. It was solid now. It was mine for real. I slept like a rock that night, first time in months without waking up every hour thinking something would cave in. For a few weeks, everything felt right. I'd come home from work, park in the driveway, sit on the hood of my truck with a beer and just watch the sun go down behind the trees. It wasn't a palace. It wasn't fancy. But it was mine. Built on sweat and bloody knuckles and stubbornness. I thought the worst was behind me. I thought the fight was over. I didn't know the fire was already on its way. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was halfway through my shift, sorting pallets at the warehouse, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Frank, the neighbor across the street. Good guy. Kept his grass a little too short, but he always waved when I pulled in after work. I figured maybe he was calling to ask about borrowing a ladder or something. I almost didn't answer. Wish I hadn't. "Ryan," he said, voice tight and fast. "Your house. It's on fire. Fire trucks are here," but I didn't hear the rest. Dropped everything, sprinted to my truck, tires screaming as I tore out of the parking lot. I didn't even think. Just drove like the devil was on my heels. The smoke was visible 3 blocks away. Thick. Black. Curling up into the sky like a giant hand squeezing the air. When I skidded into the cul-de-sac, the world was chaos. Red lights flashing. Water blasting from hoses. Half the roof was already gone. The porch sagged in like a kicked-in chest. Flames licked at what was left of the living room window. I jumped out, but a firefighter caught me by the arm before I could get too close. "You can't go in," he said. "It's not safe." I just stood there, numb, watching everything I'd built melt into ash. I stayed until the last ember was put out. Until the trucks packed up. Until the crowd of neighbors, pretending not to stare, finally wandered back into their perfect, untouched houses. Frank offered to let me crash at his place that night. I said no. I needed to see it. Needed to feel it. I sat on the curb across the street until the sun went down. Until the house wasn't a house anymore. Just a blackened shell with smoke still twisting out of the broken windows. No insurance. I couldn't afford it yet. It was on my list, right after fixing the kitchen and patching the back fence. And now there was nothing left to insure anyway. The next day I called a contractor just to see. Maybe, a miracle. He didn't even bother sugarcoating it. "Total loss," he said. "You'd spend more rebuilding than the place is worth." I went home. Not my home. My parents' house. Back to the spare room that smelled like old carpet and missed chances. I didn't unpack. Didn't talk much. Just sat there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like something inside me had burned up right along with those walls. I wasn't just broke. I was hollow. And I didn't know if there was enough of me left to start again. It took a long time to even think about the house without feeling like I was choking. Months, really. I worked whatever shifts I could get. Odd jobs. Warehouse nights. Anything to keep the loan sharks off my back. Every paycheck disappeared before I could even hold it. Some nights I thought about just giving it all up. Let the bank come. Let the debt collectors howl. But I couldn't. Not because I was noble or stubborn. Because somewhere, under all that ash and debt and failure, I still loved that place. It was stupid. It was reckless. It was mine. One night my dad came into my room, didn't knock, just leaned against the doorframe like he used to when I was a kid. "It's still your land," he said. Fire didn't take that. I didn't answer. Couldn't. But the words stuck. The next weekend, I drove back out. Pulled up in front of the ruins. Weeds already starting to crawl up the wreckage. Ash still in the corners of the driveway. I stood there for a long time, breathing in the smell of damp smoke and broken promises. Then I picked up a shovel. I didn't even know where to start. So I just started. One brick at a time. One blackened board. One busted pipe. I cleared what I could by hand. Hauled it to the edge of the property. Made a plan on the back of a receipt I found in the truck. Cheap plywood. Salvaged nails. YouTube videos about framing walls and pouring concrete. I wasn't trying to rebuild the dream. I just wanted a roof. 4 walls. A beginning. Word must have gotten around, because a few weeks later Frank showed up with a wheelbarrow and a case of cheap beer. Didn't say much, just started stacking bricks. Then another neighbor dropped off a bucket of nails. A retired guy down the street lent me his old circular saw. It wasn't charity. It was respect. One night, when I was hammering up the first frame of what might someday be a front porch, Claire, she lived 2 houses over, walked up holding a pie. "Figured you might need something that doesn't taste like drywall dust," she said. I laughed for the first time in months. Real laugh. Heavy and cracked, but real. She stayed and talked for a while. Told me about her work, her terrible dog, the neighbor who always tried to mow his lawn in socks. Nothing serious. Nothing heavy. Just life. She started stopping by more often after that. Sometimes with cookies, sometimes with lemonade, sometimes just herself. I didn't ask for it. I didn't expect it. But every time she showed up, the pieces of me that had burned up didn't feel so sharp. Little by little, the house grew. It wasn't much yet. A frame. Some walls. A patched-together roof that leaked when it rained. But it was enough. Enough to believe again. Enough to build on. Enough to stand. And when I finally sat down on the rough wooden steps one evening, sweat-streaked and splintered and sore, Claire sat down next to me without asking. No words. Just a quiet, steady presence. I looked out at the skeleton of my future rising from the wreckage and thought, maybe you don't get back what you lost. Maybe you build something better from the ashes. Subscribe, hit the like button, and explore more fascinating stories.